But the court was to hear a lot more about Eugene Thomas. And the court also heard discussions about what was dumped at the tip. The witness tried to get out of Barlow where the other barrel was. As the secret witness gave evidence against him, and as the court listened to what was supposed to have been private conversations between two close mates, John Barlow sat, apparently almost unaffected, in the dock.
What would make you think that I would do that? What would be the reason? There's no reason why your story does not stack up.
In cross-examination, the court was to learn that the secret witness and Barlow had been planning to put an investment scheme to Thomas and Thomas. John Barlow was to have presented it to Eugene Thomas on the night of the murders. Like Barlow, his mate had also had a passion for guns, and in fact had borrowed the same CZ-27 previously. Under cross-examination, the court learned after being a wealthy insurance salesman, he was made redundant. He also had a conviction for fraud. This was the opportunity for John Billington to revive the defence's theory with a bizarre twist and the chance for the jury to witness the most theatrical performance of the trial.
You knew before the 16th of February that this idea was to be discussed with Mrs. Thomas of the Invincible Insurance Company, correct?
No, I did not.
You said maybe when I asked you before. Think again.
I, to the best of my recollection, have never been told by Mr. Barlow that he intended to discuss the idea with either Mr. Thomas Senior or Junior.
You had the capacity, either by motorbike or air travel, to travel to Wellington on the 16th of February 1994, didn't you?
Perhaps.
You had the capacity and the skills and the knowledge and the motive to shoot the Thomases, didn't you?
Well, I really think you're painting a fairy story now, Mr. Billington. I've never intended to murder anyone in my life.
If that company wanted your idea, but not you, your $2 million a year was out the window, wasn't it?
I'm afraid you're wrong, Mr. Billington, because if I had approached someone and got knocked back on my idea, I would have merely gone knocking on another door. That is what a salesperson does.
You've been knocking on doors for years without success. You weren't going to knock on any doors with this idea because you were unacceptable in the insurance industry, weren't you?
That's not to say at the end of the day he has done it. But when you look at the list of suspects the police have canvassed or thought about, he's not one. But when you look at what I can do in 2 hours of cross-examination, you can see that he fits a picture that is equally likely to be culpable as Mr. Barlow. Now, what the jury make of it, they can say, well, we think he might have done it, or they can say, well, he didn't do it, obviously, but nonetheless, you can see how you can make the case fit if you want to make it fit.
John Billington's cross-examination had stunned the court and the public gallery. Reaction was divided as to whether it had helped or hindered the defence's case. But what it did provide was a great deal of speculation as to the challenge the defence was about to mount. On the 14th day in the High Court trial of John Barlow, Defence Counsel began their opening address.
It is my submission to you that too soon and too early the police mind closed itself to other reasonable possibilities. The defence case then is this. Others had motive, had a reason, perhaps. So the most important thing in the end of this trial is not what might have happened, but rather whether you can be satisfied and beyond reasonable doubt that Mr. Barlow was the offender.
Billington's opening had come on a Friday, which left the jury all weekend anticipating a new twist in the defence's case. But on that Monday morning, all the jury was to get was a handful of witnesses who had been in the vicinity of the murders near the time and had observed unusual behaviour.
That person caught my eye throughout this particular day, yes. And I was distracted by the movement of that person.
He was pacing up and down, and he was constantly smoking, and he kept turning round and looking up at the building.
Up at which building?
Invincible House.
I noticed the same car, the same man, just staring up the terrace, and I thought at this stage maybe he'd had a heart attack or a stroke, because he was still leaning on the steering wheel, just staring straight ahead.
2 buildings away, there were 2 men in an office, and one was sitting at a desk facing us, and the other with his back to us.
Yes, and what did you observe?
The man with his back to us had what appeared to me, or what I speculated to be, was a holster. It was a cross strap across his shoulders, and I speculated that it was that he might have been carrying a gun.
It was a brown leather harness that went, I think, over his left shoulder and right shoulder, with what appeared to be a holster under his left armpit.
In a day and a half, the defence's case was over. John Barlow, accused of double murder, exercised his right not to give evidence. Defendants are never forced to give evidence at their own trials. This is an extension of the fundamental rule that the Crown must prove the guilt of an accused. A defendant is not required to prove their innocence. Whether their client should give evidence is always one of the most difficult decisions for defence lawyers.
He gives evidence. It changes things significantly in that a judgment may be made by jurors not so much on evidence, which is required to prove him guilty, but rather on a feeling they may have about him.
John Robert Barlow believed he could get away with murder.
On the 16th day of the trial, the closing addresses began.
3 things went wrong for him. First of all, Barlow could not have known that as well as using desk diaries for appointments, the Thomases had small pocket diaries as well, which also had his name recorded for an appointment late that day. That was one thing. Secondly, and much more importantly, however, he was seen by the 2 cleaners. And then a third thing went wrong. The accused could not have imagined that the police would so quickly have found the receipt for the Happy Valley tip in his car. If that tip ticket had not been found, and that search not conducted as thoroughly and as promptly as it was, it is most unlikely any of us would be here today. In my submission, the accused in this case has no credibility whatever. And I want you to watch the grievously wounded bodies of 2 people who were acquaintances over a number of years, killed in obviously horrendous circumstances, and yet doesn't have the basic humanity to go and call the police or ambulance, but merely carefully and coldly attempts to cover his tracks and hide the evidence and lie his way out of what happened. As I said to you when I began earlier this morning, the accused Barlow thought he could get away with murder. I suggest you ensure that he does not. Please.